Lego, it could always get worse. At the very least, Quinn Hughes is on top of the league in defenseman points. And we still have Pettersson and Miller and Besser and Horvat. They're scoring goals sometimes. Not all the time, but they're here. Miller's getting points. Horvat's getting goals. It could always be worse. And yes, I get that. I know. Don't worry. What we're having here is quite literally not the worst case scenario, but for all intents and purposes, I'm going to make this video here talking about how the Vancouver Canucks are pretty much exhibiting their worst case scenario. And a lot of that does have to do with expectation. That's pretty much it. It's expectation. It's how this team went from what it was last year. Yeah, I'm going to say last year because last year was 2020, and 2020 in the playoffs, hey, that was in 2020. I can legitimately say last year because it's verbally correct this time. Last year, the Vancouver Canucks were a team that made itself all the way 10 minutes to the Western Conference Finals. Now, they bailed out. They didn't end up winning that Game 7 against Vegas with 10 minutes to go with the game-winning goal scored then. But what the Vancouver Canucks did from that point until now has been so drastic. It's been so big. And the expectation compared to what we have today, it's completely shifted. It's the absolute worst case scenario here. And while things could get worse, I get that. I think it would have been very difficult to realistically predict a worse outcome to the season so far that the Vancouver Canucks have been experiencing. And I know it's only been like 15 games or whatever. Sure, we're only like, 20% through the season? There are still 80% more games to fix things up, to start winning again. But the thing with this Vancouver Canucks team so far in 2020, or excuse me, it's 2021 now. My gosh, I just said that earlier. The biggest thing about this team in 2021 is that now, if you take a look at the overall vibe, I guess, the vibe around the fan base, the vibe around the media, the vibe around the team, just looking at the press conferences. This team has an identity that is so different than what it was all the way back in August. Back last year in 2020, the 2019-2020 season, the Vancouver Canucks were a team that when you watched them head into the third period down a goal, you would be kind of hopeful. You would be sitting there thinking, whoa, okay, we're down by one. Don't worry. It's all good. We've got Miller. We've got Pettersson and Besser. This new formed lotto line is over there. We've got Quinn Hughes and Tanev there at the point. If worse comes to worse, we've got Jacob Markstrom to bail us out. And you felt hopeful. Sometimes you'd actually be paid off in your hope because the Canucks would tie it. Sometimes win in overtime, maybe a shootout, whatever. Last year, there was hope amongst this team. Last year, there was a hope that existed amongst the team that said, wow, even though we just got outshot like 40-5 in that game, Thatcher Demko can lead us to victory. Jacob Markstrom can come out here and lead us to victory. There was still that idea that existed that says maybe, just maybe, there's a chance for this team to win. But last night, against Toronto, 2 nights ago, was it 2 nights ago? I don't know, 3 nights ago, against Montreal, 4 nights ago against Montreal. In fact, every game against Montreal, that hasn't been there. I get that against Ottawa, things were different, but Ottawa is Ottawa. I get that against Winnipeg, things were different, but I said in the video we made about the Winnipeg win, I didn't think the Jets were playing their best hockey that night. But regardless, the Vancouver Canucks identity has gone from a team that a lot of people would like to cheer about, a team that people in the media said reminded them of a young Chicago Blackhawks dynasty with Taves and Kane and Keith, to a team that can barely just hold the line at 5 goals a game. That a team over the past few games has exhibited, if you take a look at the numbers, the most goals against per game in the entire league. A team that can't keep the puck out of the net. A team that has come over to absolutely loathe the way that it defends. And I say the worst case scenario because who would have thought that replacing Chris Tanev with Nate Schmidt would be this astronomically bad on the defensive side of the blue line? Now I know Travis Hamonic was supposed to come in here and be that defensive presence, and I get him being in the lineup would change this overall outlook. But my point here is this. No matter what you think about the Vancouver Canucks decor with or without Travis Hamonic, you can't go out there and tell me that Hamonic himself alone is going to be the biggest change in what makes the Vancouver Canucks stop giving up 5 goals a game and average it down to about 2 or 3. I get it's a straw man because you could say, oh, but Tanev, you could say the same thing about Tanev. Why are you coming out here and insinuating that Tanev was the fix to the Vancouver Canucks decor? Well, he wasn't just that. He was a part of it, but not the entire thing in itself. Because the Vancouver Canucks last year also had Jacob Markstrom, who had, at very common amounts of times, just astronomically up and away amazing goaltending. May I remind you, Jacob Markstrom wasn't a Vezina finalist last year, but he was close to it. He was 4th overall in the voting. This was a guy who could single-handedly win his team a game, night in and night out. And sure, he would let in a few stinkers once in a while, but he made up for it with so many astronomically great performances that Canucks fans were bailed out, seeing this team stay in games they probably shouldn't have been in. We remember this last year, right? The Canucks had so many games where Jacob Markstrom eventually had to, force his team to win. He willed wins out of this Vancouver Canucks team because he just would not allow goals. There was, that stat that came up before the league got shut down saying that Jacob Markstrom, out of all the goalies in the NHL, had stolen more games for his hockey team than anybody else in the entire league. It's because defense was always kind of a problem for the Vancouver Canucks. It's just they got bailed out of it by goaltending that was above average every single night. And it's a reason why when you take a look at the Toronto loss last night, for example, Thatcher Demko allowed 7 goals in 37 shots, like an 8-something save percentage. The problem is, he wasn't even the problem. It could have been much worse. It's just the Vancouver Canucks team without a shutdown defenseman to the caliber of Chris Tanev. Sure, Jalen Chatfield is good, but Chris Tanev blocking shots. Canucks don't really have that much of a shot-blocking machine like Chris Tanev was last year. And plus, the Quinn Hughes experiment where he's being given the defensive load now because Chris Tanev is gone. Yeah, it's not really working out all too well for Quinn Hughes. It's exposing what was a very big flaw in the Vancouver Canucks defensive system that's been there for a while. We just didn't really expect it to get bigger, now didn't we? Even on the forward side of things, this Vancouver Canucks forward core can score goals. They can. They've got goals coming from guys like Horvat, like Miller, like Pettersson, now hopefully. Bessler's look really good too. Höglander's out there, he's a machine. But the worst case scenario out of Tyler Toffoli has arisen, where this guy is the Vancouver kryptonite. There was an article the other day I saw talking about how Tyler Toffoli is like the new Mark Messier for Vancouver. I didn't want to make a video about that because it's just so laughable. But even though Tyler Toffoli is so good, and he makes a lot of Canucks fans so mad, it's not even because Tyler Toffoli is Tyler Toffoli. We love Tyler Toffoli. Every Canucks fan, I think, loves Tyler Toffoli. It's just we understand the implications as to why he is even doing this stuff to the Canucks. It's retribution for that really just terrible management that we have seen from up top. And it's that kind of attitude that Canucks have exuded that kind of leads us to being more angry at the management instead of Toffoli. There's no anger towards Tyler Toffoli here like there is against Mark Messier. Come on, article, get out of here, buddy. But the worst case scenario has happened here, where the Vancouver Canucks let go of a guy in Tyler Toffoli, who has all of a sudden become the best player in the world against Vancouver, and probably single-handedly a big reason as to why the Canucks have stopped winning games against Montreal. If it's Tyler Toffoli suiting up for the blue and white instead of the red and blue in those games, who knows how different the results would be. And it's all combining into what is a suffering of identity with this team. The loss of the heart and soul of a Troy Stecher. The loss of the very clutch goaltending that Jacob Markstrom had. The shut-down, shot-blocking machine that is Chris Tanev. The Vancouver Canucks, on paper, were supposed to have a team that was able to match this, if not get a little bit further ahead than this, because the players they acquired, while in reality have not really been all too well so far, were supposed to be, on paper, as good if not better. The Canucks, the entire time, they said we wanted to take a step forward. We wanted to get better. We wanted to improve upon what was a very good season last year. And a lot of the pieces that allowed them to do that, yeah, they're not here anymore. Sure, getting points from PD, Miller, Besser is fine, but a lot of these defensive deficiencies and a lot of these goals being scored against our team sucks. Really does suck. I'll leave you off with this. It's the worst case scenario for a reason, because Ottawa was a team that a lot of people expected to be bad. So the fact that they're bad, it's not all that bad, right? It doesn't sting any Sens fans to see that their team is last in the North, but it stings Canucks fans because this team was building itself up towards being better, if not at the same level as it was last year. There was the hype, there was the plan, this team was supposed to be good, and on paper we saw a roster that looked like it could compete. But you know what? Screw the on-paper side of things. The on-ice side of things shows off a team that is significantly lacking in the same amount of heart, depth, and defensive capability and responsibility that we saw last year. And that is the worst case scenario for Vancouver. Let me know in the comments what you thought about this video. Hope you enjoyed this video. And bye.